Hello, this is Jacob. Welcome back to the Polysophical Society. Today I'm going to read an excerpt from Iain McGilchrist's book, The Master and His Emissary. It describes, in Iain's own words, what I am trying to imitate, I suppose, with the concept of the as if it were. When I say as if it were, this passage from The Master and His Emissary probably better describes what it is that I mean than anything that I have written or said thus far. So, if you want to read along and you happen to have the same sort of blue with a bunch of geometric patterns paperback edition as I do, it's page 170, which is the latter half of chapter 4. So starting at the top, Iain writes, "Knowledge and truth I have discussed. Again, there are two versions, one purporting to be impersonal, static, complete, a thing, and the other personal, provisional, a matter of degree, a journey." That, of course, was earlier in the chapter where Iain is talking about, for example, in German, Wissenschaft versus Erkenntnis, or Kennenlernen, which is related to the English, the Old English, wit, Wissen in German, Wittern in Old English, Middle English as well. And then Kennenlernen, we have to know. The K used to be pronounced there, know. And of course, we don't use wit in that way anymore. To know something, I wit something. I wist. Wist is the past tense of wittern, to wit. But all of this is to say that there is, in many languages, and there used to be in English, this division of what it means to know something. That you have the Wissen, you have the Saber, you have the Wittern, which are all tied in some ways to sight. That you have the left hemisphere way of knowing, which is, as it describes here, impersonal, static, complete, a thing. So it's utilitarian in nature. And then you have the other one, which is the original meaning of our verb in English, know, which is related to Greek gnosis. Think of the K and the g of G and K. They're both very interchangeable linguistically, and they'll shift to each other back and forth over time in different languages, these sort of regular consonant shifts. So gnosis and conocer in Spanish and in Latin, cognoscere. I guess that's Italian. I don't know, but it's all derived from Latin, and it's all this kennenlernen in German. That is the right hemisphere, personal, provisional, matter of degree, journey knowledge, and truth. So this is, sorry for the diversion, but I think that it's a necessary refresher of the linguistics behind these things and how they map onto Iain McGilchrist's hemisphere hypothesis of the left and the right hemispheres taking different modes of being in the world and how they interpret information as it comes into the brain, into the mind. Starting at the top again. Knowledge and truth I have discussed. Again, there are two versions, one purporting to be impersonal, static, complete, a thing, the other personal, provisional, a matter of degree, a journey. Belief is closely related and has two meanings too. So now this is the section about belief. Believing is not to be reduced to thinking that such and such might be the case. It is not a weaker form of thinking laced with doubt. Sometimes we speak like this. I believe that the train leaves at 6:13, where I believe that simply means that I think, but I am not certain that. Since the left hemisphere is concerned with what is certain, with knowledge of the facts, its version of belief, thus, is that it is just absence of certainty. If the facts were certain, according to its view, I should be able to say, I know that, instead. This view of belief comes from the left hemisphere's disposition towards the world. Interest in what is useful, therefore fixed and certain. The train timetable is no good if no one can rely on it. So, belief is just a feeble form of knowing as far as it is concerned, it here being the left cerebral hemisphere. But belief in terms of the right hemisphere is different, because its disposition towards the world is different. The right hemisphere does not know, quote-unquote, anything in the sense of certain knowledge. For it, belief is a matter of care. It describes a relationship where there is a calling and an answering, the root concept of responsibility. Think of that word, response, the ability to respond. An ability sort of brings a duty with that. Thus, if I say that I believe in you, it does not mean that I think that such and such things are the case about you, but I can't be certain that I'm right. It means that I stand in a certain sort of relation of care towards you. That entails in certain kinds of ways of behaving, acting, and being toward you. And entails on you the responsibility of certain ways of acting and being as well. It is an acting as if certain things were true about you, that in the nature of things cannot be certain. It has the characteristic right hemisphere qualities of being a betweenness, a reverberative, resonant, responsible relationship, in which each party is altered by the other, and the relationship between the two, whereas the relationship of the believer to the believed in the left hemisphere sense is inert, unidirectional, and centers on control rather than care. I think this is what Wittgenstein was trying to express when he wrote that, quote-unquote, my attitude towards the other is an attitude towards a soul. I am not of the opinion that he has a soul. An opinion would be a weak form of knowledge, and that is not what is meant by belief, a disposition or an attitude. This helps illuminate belief in God. This is not reducible to a question of factual answer to the question, does God exist? Assuming for the moment that the expression a factual answer has a meaning, it is having an attitude, holding a disposition towards the world, whereby that world, as it comes into being for me, is one in which God belongs. The belief alters the world, but it also alters me. Is it true that God exists? Truth is a disposition, one of being true to someone or something. One cannot believe in nothing, and thus avoid belief altogether, simply because one cannot have no disposition toward the world, that being in itself is a disposition. Some people choose to believe in materialism. They act as if such a philosophy were true. An answer to the question whether God exists could only come from my acting as if God is, and in this way being true to God and experiencing God, or not, as the case may be, as true to me. If I am a believer, I have to believe in God, and God, if he exists, has to believe in me. Rather like Escher's hands, the belief must arise reciprocally, not by a linear process of reasoning. This acting as if is not a sort of cop-out, an admission that really one does not believe what one pretends to believe. Quite the opposite. As Hans Weichinger understood, all knowledge, particularly scientific knowledge, is no more than an acting as if certain models were, for the time being, true. And I would add here, for the time being and in a certain context. For example, we act as if Newtonian physics is true in our day-to-day context, which it is, but it is ultimately not true in the same ways that Einsteinian theoretical physics, quantum physics, and these sorts of things are true. Newtonian physics is contextually true, but not ultimately true. And even then, the things that we describe as ultimately true in something like physics, what as Einstein and Niels Bohr and Schrödinger and Heisenberg and all these people have described a world that is fundamentally uncertain and round and flexible in ways. Even this is simply a model which works for the time being. Hans Weichinger, who wrote the philosophy of as if, in German, the philosophy of als ob. I want to discuss him because I think that he is a fascinating philosopher who has been passed over by the eye of history simply, I think, because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And he was popular right around World War I, and then with the ascent of Weimar Germany. Again, this is a very shallow understanding on my part, so take it with a grain of salt. But from what I understand, his philosophy of as if was very popular in Weimar Germany and was sort of utilized in really what I think we would call now a postmodern or a post-truth way of decentering morals, decentering German national identity, and simply saying these are really social constructs, and we treat them as if they're true, but are they really true? And I think, from what I understand, there's a decent amount of that going on. And so then, of course, with the rise of German nationalism and National Socialism, Hans Weichinger got the boot, and then no one has really reclaimed him, from my experience. And so it's really cool to see him referenced here in Iain McGilchrist's work, because this was one of the philosophers who, I've read this book so many times, Master and His Emissary. I think I'm going through it on my fourth time at this point, all the way through cover to cover, let alone going through to study bits and pieces. But when I read this at some point, the second or third time, I go out into the world and I'm reading philosophy texts and things, and I come across in my own research of this as if it were concept that I'm mimicking McGilchrist. I come across Hans Weichinger, and his philosophy of as if is, I guess, neo-Kantian in a way. He's very influenced by the neo-Kantian thinkers, Lang being first and foremost among them. And so it's this really interesting fusion of this sort of like obsession with how do we know anything, and epistemology, and sort of the grounding axioms of life that Kant is famous for, perhaps to the extreme. But then it's revised, and what you get with Hans Weichinger is this really fascinating take on knowledge itself, where it's not that you can't know anything at all, that everything is relative. It's just that we can't know in any ultimate sense about anything, because everything passes through the prism of our sense perceptions and our mind and its mental mappings and its models. And this is an insight that goes back very far. David Hume is someone who popularized this concept of all I can know is what I experience, what I see. And so that's a sort of a radical empirical nature of what can be known. But Hans Weichinger tweaks that, where he says, yes, this is why we should be humble, but that's not to say that we can't act as if certain things were true and have that be a form of empiricism, like do things work? It's a sort of modified pragmatism. And so this philosophy of as if, here it is being referenced in this section on belief in Iain McGilchrist's book, and for good reason. It's recontextualizing belief, or perhaps not even necessarily recontextualizing it, but maybe renewing the embedded contextual framework of what belief actually entails. That, like McGilchrist is saying, it's not I think but I'm not sure is what it means to believe. It's I hold a certain disposition towards fill in the blank, towards God, towards particle physics, toward all of these things that we can act as if they are true. Ultimately, these models that we build in cognitive models, we can't know with a capital K, pin in the ground, there it is, it's like this forever, because that's not what knowledge is. It's a sort of referential framework, and belief absolutely plays a part in that. So to say that I believe in God, I know, Jordan Peterson comes to mind where he's like, I believe in God as I act as if God were true and let it make himself manifest unto me. And he's been asked so many times, do you believe in God? Do you believe in God? And he always says the same thing, and to the point where it feels like he's trying to evade something. And I understand why he would say that. Like, I can be sympathetic with that, but I too also find myself thinking, he's done it so many times, it's like, just say it, yes or no. Like, do you act as if God were real? Like, that is belief. That's what belief is. Of course, what I think is trying to get at is he doesn't participate in the set of dogmas that comes along with what most people ascribe to belief in God. Okay, I can see that. But I think that things like that, behaviors like that, further entrench the left hemisphere misconstrual of what it means to believe in something. So, to finish out the chapter section here on belief, we just talked about Hans Weichinger. So now we have truth and belief, once more, as in their etymology, are profoundly connected. It is only the left hemisphere that thinks there is certainty to be found anywhere. And that is the end of that section, and that is ultimately what I am trying to describe when I say, the as if it were of something, the as if it were of God, the as if it were of agency, the as if it were of the soul. All of these things that must be treated as if they were true, even if we cannot say in a scientific materialist sense, aha, there it is, there's God, I found him, I found the planet where he lives, I found the special spirit molecule that all living beings have this thing, and then it goes away, and that's what spirit is. And I say, okay, that kind of stuff is, I think, really trite. And why is it trite? Because it is engaging with right hemisphere, entities, right hemisphere ways of being in the world and understanding our place in the world, but shoving it through a left hemisphere filter of what it means to know, of what it means to believe, and of what can be known at all. And nothing, ultimately, can be known with any real certainty, which is not to say that we cannot act with a level of certainty, that the models by which we act keep working. The sun keeps rising every day, morning and night, sun rises and sets. We can act with a level of assurance that this will continue to be so. Ultimately, it's about remembering to be humble, to be epistemically humble with what it is that we can know in general, and that is really hard for us to accept, I think, as human beings in general, but particularly as moderns, or even as postmoderns, where intelligence and knowledge and knowing things in the scientific age, it's so much a part of our self-concept. It's so much a part of our identity that we are the knowing creatures. And perhaps that's even a part of the reason why AI is so destabilizing for society beyond the economic reasons, beyond does it actually do what it purports to do, or is it hallucinating? Is it not actually really working all that well? And some of the things it does are miraculous, and the other things are like, wait a minute, I actually know what it's trying to say, and it's all wrong, and it's convinced that it's right. Which, therein lies a fascinating window into left hemisphere modes of being. And is that all that it is available to compute, the computer? Because that's what the left hemisphere does, is it computes. But anyways, I'm getting off track again. So the big push that I have had in work lately that has just consumed my life for the past month or more, it seems to finally be over. So hopefully this is the first of many more frequent recordings, and I appreciate all of those who stick around with me for these excursions. If you haven't read or listened to The Master and His Emissary, please do it. It is just a masterwork. I mean, like I said earlier in this little snippet, I have either read or listened to this book cover to cover going on 4 times now. And it's just incredible. I'm listening to it while I work right now, and it's like, I mean, I've listened to this book, I've read this book, but how on earth did I miss all of this stuff? And maybe what that means is simply that I am growing, I am learning so much more as the years go on, and now I am able to make the connections better of what Iain is saying, the references that he's making. For example, like with Hans Weichinger, I go out and I read the philosophy of as if, and then think, man, this just fits so well into Iain McGilchrist's framework. And then, of course, to reread The Master and His Emissary and find that it was there all along. That's just happening to me over and over and over again, it seems, this time. And it's a beautiful experience because it just affirms to me that this is a text, let alone the matter with things, but the Master and His Emissary is a text worth visiting and revisiting over and over. And I think ultimately that is because it attests to something fundamentally true about the nature of our lived experience, and thus the world that is co-created as we live in it. This concept of betweenness. That's Iain McGilchrist's word that he made up. I have, as if it were, he has betweenness. The unique relatedness, interrelatedness that generates between not subject and object, because that's already falling into a left hemisphere worldview of the ego and the thing being observed or manipulated. But they're both subject and object to each other at the same time. And in this betweenness relationship, that is what forms the fabric of reality itself. Everything sort of depending on everything else in this great oneness. And with that esoteric musing, I think that I will bid you adieu. So as always, thank you for joining me. This is the Polysophical Society, and until next time.